Hello guys.
I was at a friend's wedding when I found out he was cheating on his fiancée with my girlfriend, and my friends only laughed behind my back. Laura and I had been together for 8 years, and for most of that time, I believed we were building something lasting. We met in college when I was a junior, and she was a freshman. Our connection felt effortless. Late-night study sessions turned into long talks about life, dreams, and the future. I fell hard, and it felt mutual. For years into our relationship, we moved in together. Our tiny apartment became a haven of movie nights, laughter, and plans for the future, or at least, my plans. I wanted marriage, something I thought was inevitable after years together. But every time I brought it up, Laura hesitated. Not yet, she'd say, laughing it off. Let's focus on our careers first. I told myself it was just nerves or timing. Deep down, I hoped she'd come around. Then there was Adam, my best friend since college. He wasn't just a friend, he was family. We'd been through it all together, from late-night cramming sessions to heartbreaks. He was always there with a beer and an ear. Adam and Laura got along well, which I thought was a blessing. He'd joke about how lucky I was to have her, and I felt proud. I trusted them both without question. Looking back, there were signs, small, barely noticeable at the time. The way their conversations lingered, the spark in Laura's eyes when Adam told a joke. I brushed it off, chalking it up to close friendship. Why would I suspect anything? Adam was like a brother to me, and Laura was my partner. They were part of my inner circle, the people I trusted most. That trust was obliterated at Adam's wedding. What began as a joyous weekend quickly unraveled into a nightmare. It all started when I decided to skip the rehearsal dinner, nursing a headache and craving some fresh air. That simple decision led me to a betrayal so deep it shattered everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. The night before Adam's wedding, I found myself wandering outside, trying to clear my head. The headache was pounding, and the noise from the rehearsal dinner wasn't helping. I thought some fresh air would do the trick, so I slipped out quietly, leaving everyone else celebrating inside. Walking through the parking lot, I headed to my car, figuring I could grab some aspirin from the glove compartment. That's when I saw them, Laura and Adam. At first, I didn't register what was happening. They were leaning against my car, heads close together. I froze, assuming they were just talking, maybe joking around. But then Adam leaned in and kissed her. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as if my body refused to believe what my eyes were seeing. They didn't see me, too wrapped up in each other to notice anything else. My brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, a drunken mistake. But deep down, I knew better. The kiss wasn't hesitant or fleeting, it was familiar, practiced. This wasn't the first time. I turned and walked away, my chest tightening with every step. I thought about confronting them, demanding answers, but something stopped me. Instead, I headed toward the hotel where some of the other wedding guests were staying. I needed to process what I'd just seen and hoped someone, anyone, would give me clarity or comfort. When I reached one of my friend's rooms, I hesitated at the door, hearing laughter inside. Familiar voices carried through the thin walls, including Adam's and Laura's. I knocked, ready to act like nothing had happened. But before I could, I overheard something that made my stomach drop. Someone inside, laughing, said, "I can't believe he still doesn't know. Poor guy has no idea." Another voice, unmistakably Adam's, chimed in, "It's not like he pays attention. Makes it easy." The room erupted in laughter. I backed away, my heart pounding. They all knew. Every single person in that room knew about Laura and Adam, and no one had thought to tell me. Worse, they were laughing at me, treating me like the butt of a cruel joke. I didn't go back to the dinner. I didn't even go to my room. I spent the night walking the streets, trying to wrap my head around the betrayal. My best friend. My girlfriend. And the people I called my closest friends. They had all been lying to me for who knows how long. But I wasn't going to let this slide. Not anymore. If they thought I would just keep quiet and take it, they didn't know me as well as they thought. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, replaying everything I'd seen and heard, each memory cutting deeper than the last. By the time the sun rose, I had made my decision. If Adam and Laura thought I'd let them walk all over me, they were in for a rude awakening. I wasn't going to let this betrayal go unnoticed. The wedding day arrived, and I went through the motions like a man on autopilot. I got dressed, greeted the other groomsmen, and pretended everything was fine. No one suspected a thing. Adam was grinning from ear to ear, talking about how perfect the day was going to be. Laura avoided me, which only confirmed her guilt. Every time I caught her eye, she looked away, her face pale. Good. Let her squirm. The ceremony was beautiful, or at least, that's what people said. I barely registered it. My focus wasn't on Adam's vows or the bride's radiant smile. It was on the reception, where I planned to drop the bombshell that would shatter their perfect day. When the time came for the speeches, I stood up with my glass raised, pretending to be the proud best friend. The room fell silent, everyone smiling and expecting the usual jokes and heartfelt anecdotes. I cleared my throat and began. Adam, you've been my best friend for years. Like a brother, really. We've shared everything, good times, bad times, secrets. I paused, glancing around the room. Adam looked a little uneasy, and Laura's face was frozen. And now, apparently, girlfriends. The silence was deafening. You could hear a pin drop. Yeah, that's right, I continued, my voice steady. Last night, I found out my best friend and my girlfriend of 8 years have been sneaking around behind my back. And it seems a lot of you already knew. Funny how no one thought to mention it to me. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Adam's face turned bright red. His fiancée, now wife, looked at him, her expression switching from confusion to horror. Wait, what? She stammered. Ask him, I said, pointing at Adam. Or better yet, ask Laura. I'm sure they can fill in the blanks. I put the microphone down, grabbed my jacket, and walked out of the venue. Behind me, chaos erupted. Adam's new wife started yelling, Laura was in tears, and their carefully planned day descended into absolute bedlam. It was satisfying in a way I hadn't expected, like ripping off a band-aid to finally expose the wound. By the time I got back to my car, my phone was already blowing up. Messages from friends, family, even Laura. I ignored them all, packed my bags, and left town. I wasn't going to stick around to clean up their mess. They could deal with the fallout on their own. The drive home was a blur, the world outside the car windows moving past as if it belonged to someone else. My phone buzzed relentlessly, lighting up with a flood of calls and texts. I ignored it at first, unwilling to engage with the inevitable chaos I'd left behind. When I finally glanced at the screen, the messages were everything I'd expected, Adam demanding to talk, Laura pleading for a chance to explain, and a single, blunt message from Adam's now ex-fiancée, thanking me for the truth. The adrenaline that had fueled me through my speech was gone by the time I reached home. In its place was a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. For years, I'd been living with blind trust, oblivious to the betrayal happening right under my nose. Exposing them had been messy, but it felt like ripping off a band-aid to let the wound finally breathe. Over the next few days, the fallout became impossible to ignore. Friends who had been at the wedding began reaching out. Some applauded me for standing up for myself, while others criticized the timing, saying I had ruined Adam's big day. Their words didn't faze me. If anything, it cemented my resolve to cut ties with anyone who sided with him or Laura. Laura appeared at my apartment a few days later, unannounced. I hesitated before opening the door, unsure if I wanted to hear whatever excuse she'd prepared. She looked completely unlike her usual composed self, her eyes red and swollen, her voice shaky as she asked if we could talk. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat stiffly on the couch, fidgeting with her hands, and launched into an apology. She claimed she had never intended for things to spiral this way, but her words felt hollow. The weight of her confession, a year-long affair, landed like a punch to the gut. Her explanation felt rehearsed, an attempt to frame herself as a victim of circumstance. She spoke of feeling trapped, of not being ready for marriage, of the pressure she claimed I had put on her. The more she talked, the angrier I felt. Her words were nothing more than an attempt to justify something unjustifiable. There were no answers to the questions swirling in my mind, why she hadn't spoken to me, why she had chosen Adam of all people. Her vague excuses only deepened the betrayal. When the conversation ended, so did our relationship. I told her to take her things and leave. There was no anger in my voice by then, just a cold finality that left no room for argument. The next day, I blocked her on every platform. She came back once to retrieve her belongings, but it was the last time I saw her. Adam, unsurprisingly, tried to reach out as well. His message was long and filled with the kind of self-pitying apologies I'd expected. He begged for a chance to explain himself, but there was nothing he could say that would erase the damage he had done. I didn't respond. The betrayal had burned through any sense of loyalty I once felt toward him. Through mutual friends, I learned that Adam's marriage was over almost as soon as it began. His wife left him that night, and word of what had happened spread quickly among our social circle. The man who had been my closest friend lost everything in one fell swoop, his wife, his reputation, and the one person who had always stood by him. Cutting them both out of my life didn't heal the hurt immediately, but it was a step forward. I wasn't looking back. After cutting Laura and Adam out of my life, I found myself in a strange, unsettling quiet. My phone stopped buzzing, the messages dried up, and the whirlwind of the past week finally stilled. But with that silence came the weight of what I had lost, not just a relationship or a friend, but a life I'd built and a circle of people I thought I could trust. I had to start over. The first few weeks were rough. The betrayal felt like a dark cloud that followed me everywhere, coloring even the smallest moments of my day. Simple things like cooking dinner or watching TV reminded me of Laura. Seeing mutual friends' posts online made me think of Adam. Every reminder was a fresh sting, but I made a decision early on: I wasn't going to let this break me. I threw myself into work, picking up extra projects and staying late at the office. If nothing else, it gave me a sense of control, something solid to hold on to while everything else felt shaky. Outside of work, I started running again, a habit I'd let slide in recent years. It became more than just exercise. It was a way to clear my head, to feel like I was moving forward, even if it was just one step at a time. One of the hardest parts was figuring out what to do with my weekends. Laura and I had always spent them together: brunch, errands, lazy afternoons binge-watching shows. Without her, the emptiness of those 2 days hit me like a brick wall. So, I started saying yes to things I would have turned down before. A coworker invited me to a trivia night at a bar. I went and had a surprisingly good time. A distant friend suggested joining a local hiking group. I signed up and discovered that being out in nature made me feel more grounded than I had in months. The hardest hurdle was letting people back in. After what happened, I had trust issues. How could I not? But slowly, I rebuilt my circle, leaning on people who had proven themselves to be solid. Some of my older friends, the ones who'd stood by me through the chaos of Adam's wedding, became my foundation. They didn't push me to talk about what had happened but let me know they were there when I was ready. Then there was the unexpected silver lining: meeting new people. Without Laura and Adam in my life, I felt free to explore friendships I'd neglected or overlooked. Some colleagues at work became close friends, and I found myself reconnecting with old acquaintances I hadn't seen in years. These small steps helped me realize that while I had lost a lot, not everything was gone. Laura and Adam, as far as I heard, were unraveling in their own ways. Their so-called relationship didn't last long after the wedding fiasco. Friends whispered about how Laura tried to patch things up with Adam, but he wasn't interested once the fun of sneaking around had disappeared. By all accounts, they had both burned so many bridges that neither had anyone left to lean on. It wasn't satisfying to hear about their downfall, at least, not in the way I expected. By the time those updates reached me, I had already started moving on. Their drama was no longer my problem. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. As the months passed, I found myself rediscovering parts of me that had been buried under the weight of my old life. For years, my world had revolved around Laura, our shared plans, and a tight-knit friend group that included Adam. Without them, I had space to figure out who I really was outside of those relationships. One of the first things I did was dive into hobbies I'd neglected during my time with Laura. I dusted off my old guitar, something I hadn't played since college, and spent hours relearning chords and songs I used to love. Music became an outlet for emotions I couldn't quite put into words: anger, sadness, even relief. Traveling was another passion I'd let slide. Laura had never been much of a traveler, always claiming it was too expensive or too much of a hassle. Now, with no one to hold me back, I booked a solo trip to the mountains. It wasn't extravagant, just a weekend cabin rental, but it was transformative. Waking up to the sound of birds and crisp morning air, hiking alone, and sitting by a fire at night gave me a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Socially, I continued building a new circle of friends. The hiking group became a regular part of my routine, and through it, I met people who shared my love for the outdoors. We'd tackle trails on weekends, and after, we'd grab beers and swap stories about our lives. It felt refreshing to connect with people who didn't know me as Laura's boyfriend or Adam's best friend. One evening, at a friend's housewarming party, I met someone who would eventually change my life in ways I didn't see coming. Her name was Emma. She was warm, funny, and unpretentious, with a smile that felt like a breath of fresh air. Unlike Laura, she wasn't guarded or distant. She was the kind of person who made you feel comfortable right away. We didn't start dating immediately. I wasn't ready for a relationship yet, and Emma seemed to sense that. Instead, we became friends, bonding over shared interests and long conversations. It was the first time in a while that I felt genuinely excited to get to know someone. Meanwhile, Laura and Adam remained ghostly figures in the background of my life. I heard snippets about them from mutual friends, though most people avoided bringing them up around me. Laura had moved to a new city, and Adam, from what I was told, had burned through what little goodwill he had left among our former friend group. The fallout of their actions had left them isolated, but I didn't linger on their fates. The more time passed, the more I realized how much lighter I felt without them. The betrayal had been painful, but in a strange way, it forced me to confront parts of my life that I'd been ignoring for too long. I'd spent years trying to hold on to relationships that were fundamentally flawed, bending over backward to please people who didn't value me. Letting go of all that had been painful, but it was also liberating. By the end of that year, I was in a much better place. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My job was going well, I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, and I had started to dream again. For the first time in a long time, the future felt like something to look forward to, not something to fear. By the time a year had passed since Adam's disastrous wedding, the person I saw in the mirror felt almost unrecognizable, in the best way. The weight of betrayal had lifted, and the person left standing was stronger, clearer, and more self-assured than I ever thought possible. Part of that transformation came from the relationships I had built over the year. Emma, who had started as a friend, was becoming something more. It wasn't an earth-shattering, whirlwind romance, it was something quieter and steadier. We spent hours talking, laughing, and simply enjoying each other's company. She encouraged me to open up about my past, but only when I was ready. Unlike Laura, she didn't dismiss my emotions or make me feel like I was too much. One evening, over dinner, Emma said something that stuck with me. "You're allowed to take up space," she told me. "You don't have to shrink yourself to keep the peace." It was such a simple statement, but it hit me hard. For years, I'd been contorting myself to fit into other people's expectations, especially in my relationship with Laura and my friendship with Adam. For the first time, I was learning to take up space unapologetically. My professional life mirrored this growth. I had taken on new responsibilities at work, and a promotion was on the horizon. For so long, I had tied my identity to my relationships, but now I was rediscovering the pride and fulfillment that came from pursuing my own goals. The stability I built in my career gave me the confidence to start setting bigger, bolder goals for myself, financially, personally, and emotionally. Meanwhile, Emma and I continued to grow closer. One day, during a lazy Sunday hike, she stopped mid-trail and pointed at the view, rolling hills bathed in golden sunlight. "You can't carry that kind of beauty with you," she said, smiling. "You just have to soak it in while you're here." It struck me how much that sentiment applied to life itself. I had spent so much time holding on to the pain of what Adam and Laura had done, replaying those moments in my head, wondering what I could have done differently. But life, like that view, was about being present and finding joy where you stood, not dragging old baggage with you up every mountain. As for Adam and Laura, they became nothing more than distant memories. Occasionally, I'd hear about them from someone who hadn't quite exited their orbit. Adam was trying to rebuild his life, though most people had written him off as unreliable and self-serving. Laura, on the other hand, had bounced around jobs and relationships, leaving a trail of burned bridges wherever she went. I didn't feel vindictive anymore when I heard those updates, just indifferent. Their downfall didn't bring me joy, but it no longer brought me pain either. I had moved past them in every way that mattered. As I stood on that trail with Emma, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized something profound. The life I was building now wasn't about escaping the past, it was about embracing the future. I didn't just survive the betrayal, I grew because of it. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living. Life had been moving forward smoothly until an email from an unfamiliar address brought the past rushing back. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" It was from Adam. His message was brief, filled with regret, and a request to meet for coffee. He claimed he wasn't looking for forgiveness, only a chance to explain. I debated whether to reply. Part of me wanted to delete it, to keep the door to that chapter firmly shut. But curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't seeking reconciliation, I just wanted answers. So, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe. When I arrived, Adam was already there, looking far different from the confident, easygoing guy I used to know. His shoulders slumped, his face tired. He looked up as I approached, offering a hesitant smile that I didn't return. The conversation started awkwardly. Adam fidgeted with his coffee, stumbling over his words. He admitted that his actions had stemmed from jealousy, of my life, my relationship with Laura, and my ability to seemingly have it all together. Instead of dealing with his own insecurities, he had lashed out in the most destructive way possible. His words landed with little effect. "You didn't just betray me," I told him. "You turned me into a joke in front of people I trusted. That's not something you fix with an apology." He nodded, his gaze falling to the table. "I know," he said quietly, "but I had to say it anyway." He explained how his life had unraveled after the wedding, his fiancée leaving, mutual friends cutting ties, and the loneliness that followed. He said he wasn't expecting forgiveness but wanted to make things right. Hearing his admission gave me some closure, but it didn't erase the damage. When he asked if we could rebuild our friendship, I didn't hesitate. "No," I said simply. "I don't hate you, but we're done. For good." Walking out of that cafe, I felt lighter, as though a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying had finally lifted. I wasn't tied to Adam or his betrayal anymore. My future was mine, and that chapter was firmly closed. After meeting Adam, I felt like a lingering shadow had finally disappeared from my life. Confronting him had been difficult, but it reaffirmed something I'd worked hard to achieve. I had moved on. I wasn't defined by the betrayal anymore. I wasn't angry or bitter, I was free. Life continued to shift in positive ways. My relationship with Emma deepened, not just romantically but in how we supported each other. She became my sounding board, my partner in every sense of the word. I never felt the need to compare her to Laura, and for the first time in a long time, I was in a relationship where everything felt balanced. Emma had a way of making even the smallest moments feel special, whether it was hiking on a Saturday morning or sharing takeout on the couch. Professionally, things were thriving as well. I received the promotion I'd been working toward, and with it came new challenges that energized me. I started to set bigger goals for myself, no longer holding back out of fear of what others might think. The confidence I'd gained in my personal life carried over into my work, and it felt good to stand on my own 2 feet. Occasionally, I still heard snippets about Adam and Laura. They seemed to have disappeared from our old friend group entirely. Adam had tried to mend fences with a few mutual acquaintances, but his reputation was beyond repair. Laura, from what little I gathered, had moved to another city and was struggling to find stability. But their lives no longer felt relevant to me. I wasn't keeping score, and I wasn't interested in their outcomes. Instead, I focused on building something new. Emma and I started talking about the future, not in the vague way Laura and I used to, but with real plans. We weren't rushing anything, but it was clear we both wanted the same things: stability, mutual respect, and a life we could build together. I reflected often on how far I'd come. The person I was when I stood at Adam's wedding, exposing the truth, felt like a stranger to me now. That version of myself had been consumed by anger and betrayal, and while it had been necessary to take that stand, it wasn't who I wanted to remain. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't mean forgetting or allowing people back into my life. It meant letting go of the pain they caused and choosing not to let it define me. In that sense, I had forgiven Adam and Laura, not for their benefit, but for mine. Peace wasn't something I stumbled upon, it was something I worked hard to create. And in that peace, I found something even more valuable: hope. 2 years after that fateful day at Adam's wedding, my life was completely transformed. The pain of betrayal, once a constant weight, had been replaced with something brighter: gratitude. Not for what happened, but for what it taught me. Losing the people I thought I could trust was devastating, but it had cleared the path for something better, a life I was proud to call my own. Emma and I were stronger than ever. Our relationship wasn't built on grand gestures or over-the-top promises, it was steady, genuine, and filled with mutual respect. We'd recently moved in together, a decision that felt natural and exciting. Unlike my past, there was no hesitation or second-guessing. We both knew what we wanted, and for the first time, I felt completely secure with someone. We started talking more seriously about the future. Marriage was on the horizon, not because of societal expectations or pressure, but because we wanted to build something lasting. Every day with Emma felt like a reminder of what a healthy, loving partnership could be. My professional life had flourished, too. I'd embraced new challenges at work, and with them came promotions and opportunities I'd only dreamed of before. More than the success, though, I felt a newfound confidence in myself. I was no longer afraid to take risks or chase goals that once seemed out of reach. Every now and then, I'd reflect on Adam and Laura. Not often, but enough to remind myself of how far I'd come. From what little I heard through mutual connections, they had both continued to spiral. Adam had burned most of his bridges, and Laura, true to form, had left a string of failed relationships and half-hearted attempts at reinvention. But their lives no longer mattered to me. I wasn't angry or bitter, just indifferent. They were a chapter I'd closed, and my story had moved far beyond them. One afternoon, while unpacking boxes in our new apartment, Emma found an old photo of me with Adam and Laura. It must have been from one of those college parties when everything still felt simple. I stared at it for a moment, taking in the faces of 2 people who had once meant everything to me. "You okay?" Emma asked gently. I smiled and nodded. "Yeah," I said, taking the photo and slipping it into a box marked past. I realized then how true it was. I was okay. More than okay. I'd learned to let go of the things that had hurt me and embraced a life filled with people and experiences that lifted me up. This wasn't the ending of my story, it was a new beginning. And for the first time in years, I was exactly where I wanted to be.
See you later.